Hello, I'm Eleanor, and this is a new original story on the Eleanor Stories. I used to think my marriage was the kind people quietly envied. Not the loud kind of envy reserved for celebrities, mansion owners, or women with diamond bracelets and vacation photos from Capri. Ours was the softer kind, the kind that lived in long looks at neighborhood cookouts, in polite smiles at school fundraisers, in the way other women asked, almost casually, how Ryan and I had managed to stay so solid. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Seattle, where the mornings smelled like wet cedar and coffee, and where the evenings dissolved into silver mist so gently that the streetlights looked blurred around the edges. Our house stood on a curved little road lined with trimmed hedges, clean driveways, and porches glowing amber against the rain. It wasn't huge, it wasn't grand, but to me, it was proof that love could be built with two pairs of hands. I loved every inch of it. The pale blue shutters Ryan painted himself one dry weekend in May. The porch swing where I drank tea wrapped in a blanket when the air turned cold. The oak dining table we saved for instead of buying something cheaper, because Ryan said if we were going to build a life, we should choose things meant to last. The green sofa where we spent sleepy Sundays half watching football, half napping under the same throw blanket. The framed photos on the wall, ferry rides, Christmas mornings, an anniversary dinner where candlelight made his face look younger and softer, and his hand reached across the table for mine as if it belonged there more naturally than anywhere else. For years, I believed in that hand. Ryan was never dramatic with love. He wasn't the type to send huge bouquets to my office or plan surprise weekends in Napa. His love was smaller, quieter, easier to trust. He filled my gas tank when he borrowed my car. He brought me coffee the way I liked it, with just enough cream to turn it the color of sand. He texted me to drive carefully when the roads got slick. He noticed when I was low on my favorite yogurt and bought more without asking. That was the language I understood best. Not romance for display, but care woven into ordinary life. So when things began to shift, I did what loyal wives do when they are afraid of sounding foolish. I explained everything away. At first, the changes were so small they felt almost rude to notice. Ryan started coming home later, but not in a way that sounded suspicious when spoken aloud. 10 minutes, 20, then 40. Dinner had to be reheated once or twice a week, then more, then often enough that I stopped setting the table until I heard the garage door open. Still, every delay came with an explanation ready before I even asked. Traffic was bad. A client had called. His boss had dropped extra work on him. Someone at the office needed help wrapping up a report. All of it sounded reasonable. That was the problem. There was nothing sharp enough to grab hold of. No lipstick on a collar. No perfume that wasn't mine. No obvious lie so absurd it collapsed under its own weight. Only little things. His shoulders were tighter when he got home. His smile looked delayed, as if he had to remember to put it on. Some nights he kissed my cheek without really seeing me. Some nights he went straight to the shower before dinner and stood there so long that the bathroom mirror fogged over completely. I told myself he was tired, stressed, buried under pressure. I told myself marriage had seasons, and not all of them felt warm. I told myself that real love meant making room for exhaustion. Then there was the phone. Ryan had never been careless with it exactly, but he had never treated it like a secret either. He used to leave it face up on the kitchen counter, on the arm of the sofa, next to the sink while he shaved. If a text came while he was driving, he'd ask me to read it. If his mother called, he'd laugh, hand the phone to me, and mouth, "You deal with her." But somewhere along the way, that changed. He started carrying it with him everywhere. Not just from room to room, everywhere. To the garage, to the backyard, to get the mail, to the laundry room, into the bathroom, into the shower. And at night, he placed it face down on his nightstand. Always face down. Always silent. The first moment that truly chilled me was so small it still feels ridiculous to describe, as if marriages only deserve fear when something dramatic happens. But I was folding laundry on the bed when his phone lit up beside me. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't reaching for it. I only glanced because light flashed across the corner of my eye. There was no name, just a number. And beneath it, a preview of the message. Miss you already. My hand stopped inside one of his shirts. I remember every detail of that second with painful clarity. The shirt was blue and white checkered, one of his favorites. The collar just slightly worn because he never threw away anything he considered perfectly usable. My fingers were tucked into the sleeves, folding them inward, and suddenly I couldn't remember how to finish. The room felt too still. From the kitchen, I could hear water running and the clink of a plate touching ceramic. Ryan was humming under his breath, something absent and content, as if the world were exactly as it should be. When he walked back into the bedroom, I lifted my eyes and said, as evenly as I could, "Your phone went off." He didn't look startled. That almost hurt more. "Probably spam," he said. Then he picked it up too fast. Not enough for someone else to notice. Enough for me. His thumb crossed the screen. His expression shifted for a fraction of a second, then smoothed out so completely I might have doubted what I'd seen if my heart hadn't already begun pounding. He slipped the phone into his pocket and asked if I wanted to order takeout and watch something, as if nothing had happened. That night, I lay awake listening to rain tapping softly at the windows. My body turned toward the dark while Ryan slept beside me. I told myself the message could mean anything. A joke, a wrong number, a coworker being weird. My mind worked hard for him, harder than it worked for me. That is the ugliest part of betrayal in the beginning. Before your heart breaks, it often becomes an accomplice. I began living in two realities at once. In one, I was still Ryan's wife. I packed his lunches sometimes. I reminded him about dinner with his sister. I smiled when neighbors waved and asked how we were doing. I stood beside him in grocery store aisles comparing pasta sauces, listening to him debate brands like a man whose biggest secret was whether he preferred spicy or garlic. In that version of my life, everything still looked intact. The house was clean, the bills were paid. Our names were still written side by side on the holiday card list taped inside the pantry door. In the other reality, the hidden one, I had started watching my husband the way people watch a storm rolling toward them across open water. Quietly, carefully, with dread. After the message, I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. For 3 days, I acted almost normally. I laughed at the right moments. I asked about his meetings. I let him kiss my forehead when he left for work. But inside, my thoughts had changed texture. Everything felt sharp. Every delay, every excuse, every glance at his phone landed somewhere deep in me and stayed there. Then the lies began multiplying too fast to ignore. One Thursday evening, Ryan texted that he had to stay late because a client dinner ran over. I read the message while standing at the kitchen counter with a bowl of salad greens in my hands. I almost believed it. Almost. But an hour later, I ran into our neighbor Melissa at the pharmacy, and in the middle of small talk, she smiled and said, "I saw Ryan downtown tonight." I almost called out, but he looked busy. Something in me went very still. "Downtown?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, near Pike Place. Around 6:30, maybe?" He was crossing the street with someone. With someone? A woman, I think, she said lightly, already sensing the air shift. Maybe a coworker. I only saw them for a second. I smiled. I even heard myself say, probably was. But I don't remember the drive home. I only remember standing in my kitchen afterward, the pharmacy bag on the counter, staring at the refrigerator door where our anniversary card from last year was still held up by a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Ryan had written inside it that I was his safest place, his home, the woman he wanted beside him for every version of the future. When he came in that night, he smelled like cologne and cold air. "How was dinner?" I asked. He loosened his tie. Long, loud, boring. "Where was it?" He hesitated, just enough. "A steak place in Bellevue." That was when I knew. Not suspected. Knew. Because if Melissa had seen him near Pike Place at 6:30, he could not have been in Bellevue at the client dinner he described so casually while setting his keys in the bowl by the door. I looked at his face, at the mouth I had kissed, at the eyes I had trusted more than my own instincts, and I felt something rip quietly inside me. Still, I said nothing. Not because I was weak. Because I was not ready to hear what came after the question. The next week, I found the receipt. It was in the pocket of his navy jacket while I was sorting laundry. I nearly missed it. Just a folded slip of paper, softened by fabric and time. I opened it without thinking, expecting gum or parking validation. Instead, I found a receipt from a boutique hotel in downtown Seattle. Tuesday, 2 glasses of wine, 1 room service dessert. Check-in at 4:12 p.m. My hands started shaking so hard the paper made a dry crackling sound. Tuesday was the day Ryan had told me he was driving to Tacoma for an all-day vendor review. I sat on the edge of the bed with that receipt in my lap, staring at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something harmless if I waited long enough. But they didn't. Truth never does. It just sits there, ugly and plain, while your mind begs for another explanation. When Ryan came home, I was still holding it. He stopped in the doorway of our bedroom and looked at my face first, then at the receipt. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he said very softly, "Emily." "No," I said. And even to me, my voice sounded unfamiliar, too calm, too flat. "Don't say my name like that." He closed the door behind him. "I can explain." "That's interesting," I said, "because I've listened to a lot of your explanations lately." He stepped closer. "It's not what you think." I laughed then, a terrible, broken sound. Do men hear themselves when they say that? Do you all get handed the same script? His face changed. Not into shame, not yet. Into discomfort, into calculation. He was trying to decide what I knew, how much I knew, which version of the lie might still save him. And that hurt more than anything. Because in that moment, even then, he was still managing me. "How long?" I asked. He rubbed a hand over his mouth. "Emily, please." "How long?" He looked away. That was my answer. I stood up so quickly the receipt fell to the floor. "How long, Ryan?" "A few months," he said. It was almost funny the way he said it, like he was choosing the smallest number he thought I could survive. I stared at him. "You're lying again." He said nothing. The silence stretched, and then broke under its own weight. "Over a year," he whispered. The room seemed to tilt. More than a year. More than birthdays, holidays, dinners with friends, weekend trips, family photos, grocery lists, sick days, ordinary mornings. More than a year of sleeping beside me, touching me, thanking me for making coffee, asking what I wanted for Christmas, while another life ran silently beneath ours like a dark river underground. "Who is she?" I asked. He sank onto the chair by the window and covered his face for a moment. "It started at work." That wasn't an answer, but it told me enough. Not a mistake, not one night, not a lapse. A second life, fed slowly, protected carefully, while I stood in the bright front rooms of our marriage believing the foundation under me was real. That was the worst part. Not only that he betrayed me, that he let me keep believing. The next morning, I woke up before dawn with a strange, hollow feeling that follows a disaster no one else can see. For one suspended second, I didn't remember. Then I turned my head, saw Ryan asleep beside me, and the truth came rushing back so hard it felt physical. My chest tightened. My skin went cold. The room looked the same, the gray light at the curtains, the digital clock glowing on the dresser, the pile of folded laundry on the chair, but nothing in it belonged to the life I thought I had. I slipped out of bed without waking him. In the kitchen, I made coffee out of habit and stood at the counter without drinking it. My hands curled around the warm mug while my mind kept replaying the same fragments. Over a year. It started at work. His face when he realized I had proof. Not panic, not remorse at first. Calculation. That was the image that would not leave me. A husband measuring the damage. A man deciding which lie still had enough life in it to use. Ryan came downstairs around 7, moving cautiously, as if I were a frightened animal that might bolt. He had changed into the soft gray sweater I bought him last Christmas, the one he wore on easy weekends. I almost laughed at the cruelty of that detail. Even then, even now, he was wrapped in something chosen by my love. "Emily," he said quietly. I turned and looked at him. "Don't use that voice with me." He stopped near the table. "I know I've hurt you." The simplicity of it made anger rise in me so fast it steadied me. Hurt. As if he had forgotten an anniversary or made a thoughtless joke in front of friends. As if there were language gentle enough for what he had done. "You didn't hurt me," I said. "You dismantled my life while I was still living in it." His face tightened. "I never wanted this." "No," I said. "You wanted both." That landed. I saw it. He looked down, then away, and in that one broken glance, I understood something I had been resisting all night. Men like Ryan do not build double lives by accident. They build them because they believe they deserve two sources of comfort, two versions of themselves, two women carrying the emotional cost of their indecision. He sat down at the table without asking. I ended it. I stared at him. "When?" He hesitated. I let out a breath that almost became a laugh. "Exactly. It's complicated." "No," I said. "Complicated is refinancing a mortgage or helping an aging parent. This is simple. You lied. You cheated. You came home and climbed into bed with me while another woman was living in your pocket." He flinched, but not enough. That day should have been the end. Clean. Final. The kind of moment women describe later with fierce clarity, the point where self-respect rose up and carried them out the door. But life doesn't always move like that. Not when years are involved. Not when memories fight the truth for space inside your body. Because even while I hated him, I could still remember the good version of us. Ryan bringing me soup when I had the flu, and sitting on the bathroom floor until the fever broke. Ryan kneeling in muddy grass to fix the broken latch on our gate because I said the wind scared me when it banged open at night. Ryan holding my hand in silence the day my father was buried. Those memories didn't vanish just because I had learned the truth. They stayed, sharp as glass, tender as bruises. That was what made everything unbearable. I was grieving a man who had existed, and a man who maybe never had. For the next 2 weeks, we lived inside a kind of private war. Ryan tried, at first, to become the husband I had wanted all along. He came home early. He put his phone on the counter where I could see it. He asked if we could talk. He offered counseling. He said he would do anything. But every promise had a seam in it, and I could feel it. When I asked direct questions, his answers blurred. When I asked for the whole truth, he gave me edited truth. He admitted only what he thought I could confirm. He cried once, but even then I could not stop wondering whether he was grieving me or grieving the collapse of the life he had balanced so carelessly. At night, I lay awake beside him and felt my body recoil from his nearness. During the day, I wandered through the house touching familiar objects as if they might explain how betrayal could live so comfortably among ordinary things. The cereal boxes in the pantry, his shoes by the door, the coffee mug with the chipped rim he always reached for first. Nothing looked poisoned, yet everything was. One evening, he found me in the backyard pulling dead leaves from the hydrangea bed with my bare hands. "You're freezing," he said from behind me. I kept working. "Go inside." He stepped closer. "Please talk to me." I sat back on my heels and looked up at him. The sky was the color of wet cement. The air smelled like rain and dirt. "You want to know the truth? I talk to you constantly." In my head, I ask you things all day. I ask how you kissed me after being with her. I ask how you watched me decorate the house for Christmas and never once felt sick. I ask whether you laughed at me with her. His face went white. "I never laughed at you." "Then what did you do? Protect me? Spare me?" He had no answer. That silence became our marriage. Not the old silences, the comfortable ones filled with shared routines and safe understanding. These were new, dense, humiliating. I could feel them changing me. I stopped playing music while I cooked, stopped answering calls from friends, stopped making plans more than a day ahead. My whole life had narrowed to one terrible question. Was loving the man I had married worth the cost of becoming someone I no longer recognized? I started noticing the smallest humiliations first. Not the affair itself, though that sat in every room like smoke, but the way it had changed me. I checked the driveway when Ryan was late and hated myself before his headlights even appeared. I watched his face while he answered harmless questions and wondered which version of his voice was real. I measured pauses. I studied silence. I woke at 3 a.m. with my jaw clenched, my heart racing, my mind building scenes I never asked for. A hotel room, a second toothbrush, her hand on his sleeve, his laugh, lowered and intimate, save for someone who had never spent years building a life with him. That was the part no one talks about enough. Betrayal doesn't only wound you with what happened. It colonizes your imagination. It takes over your nervous system. It teaches your body to live as if danger is always nearby, even in your own kitchen, even in your own bed. I could feel it happening to me. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the microwave door while waiting for tea to heat. My hair was tied back carelessly. There were shadows under my eyes I'd stopped trying to cover. My shoulders looked rounded, protective, almost defensive. I didn't look like a woman thinking through a hard season in her marriage. I looked like someone shrinking to fit inside pain. That frightened me more than Ryan did. Because for weeks I had framed every question around him. Did he mean it? Was he sorry? Could he change? Was the marriage still salvageable? I kept turning toward the ruins as if the ruins might answer me. But standing there in that dim reflection, holding a mug I had forgotten to drink from, another question came quietly and cleanly. What is this doing to me? I couldn't shake it after that. The next day, I drove to the waterfront after lunch and sat in my car watching the gray water move under a sky so low it seemed to press on everything. Ferries crossed slowly in the distance, white against steel-colored waves. People passed in coats and scarves, carrying coffee, walking dogs, living their ordinary lives. I envied them with an almost childish intensity, not because their lives were perfect, because they looked unoccupied, untorn apart, free to think about groceries, meetings, school pickup, dinner, free from the constant inner trial I had been conducting inside myself. I called my friend Nora from the car. She answered on the second ring and said immediately, "What happened?" I almost broke just hearing a voice that knew me before I spoke. We met an hour later at a small cafe near Alki, one with fogged windows and mismatched mugs. I hadn't told many people. Shame had sealed my mouth more effectively than loyalty ever had. Saying it aloud made it real in a new way. But once I started, the words came fast. The message, the receipt, the lies. The way Ryan apologized and deflected in the same breath. The exhaustion. The confusion. The terrible pull of old memories. Nora didn't interrupt. When I finally stopped, she reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Emily," she said, very gently, "you keep talking about whether he deserves another chance, but you haven't once asked whether you deserve to live like this." I looked down at our hands. The cafe noise blurred around us. Cups clinked, milk steamed. Someone laughed near the register. And in the middle of all that ordinary life, her question settled into me with a weight that felt almost holy. Did I deserve this life? This vigilance? This degradation of spirit? This daily negotiation with my own self-respect? No. The answer came before I was ready for it. No, I did not. That evening, Ryan was home before me. He was in the kitchen chopping garlic, performing care with desperate precision. The smell hit me when I opened the door. Tomato sauce, basil, red wine. He turned too quickly when he heard me, as if he had been listening for my key in the lock. "I made dinner," he said. I set down my purse. "Why?" He blinked. "Because I wanted to." "No," I said, looking at him steadily. "Why today?" His mouth tightened. He knew the answer. He knew I had moved in some way he could not yet measure. "I'm trying," he said. "I know." "Then why do you sound like that?" Because I was tired. Because pity had started replacing hope. Because his efforts felt like decorations hung over structural damage. Because each gesture now came burdened with strategy, and I could no longer separate love from management. I took off my coat slowly and draped it over the chair. I can't keep living in a house where reality changes depending on what you're willing to admit. He stared at the cutting board. I said I was sorry. "And I believe you are sorry," I said. "I just don't think you're sorry in the way I need." That made him look up. "What does that mean?" "It means you're sorry this exploded. Sorry, I know. Sorry you might lose this life. But I still don't know if you're sorry enough to tell the truth without being cornered." He put the knife down. "So what? That's it?" I felt my heartbeat in my throat, but my voice stayed calm. "I don't know what it is anymore. I only know I disappear a little more every day I stay inside this." He leaned both hands on the counter. "You're giving up." I almost smiled, the audacity of that word. "No," I said. "I'm the only one here who didn't." The silence after that felt different from all the others. Not helpless, not raw. Final in a way that frightened me because it also brought relief. That night I slept in the guest room with the door locked. I expected to cry. Instead, I lay there in the dark, listening to the heater click on and off, and felt something unfamiliar moving beneath the grief. Not peace, not yet, but direction. For the first time since the truth came out, I wasn't asking how to save the marriage. I was asking how to save myself. The next week, I rented a small apartment across town. I didn't tell Ryan before I did it. I couldn't bear one more conversation in which my pain became a courtroom and he positioned himself at the center of it, pleading, explaining, bargaining. So I handled it quietly. I took a long lunch break, drove to a low brick building near Green Lake, and met a tired woman in a beige cardigan who showed me a one-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and old paint. The kitchen was narrow. The windows were plain. The carpet needed replacing. Nothing about it looked like the home I had once imagined for myself. And yet, when I stepped inside, keys still warm from the manager's hand, I felt my lungs fill properly for the first time in weeks. There was no history there. No dining table bought with hope. No porch swing. No photographs smiling lies back at me from the wall. No side of the closet where my dresses hung beside the suits Ryan wore to meetings and hotel rooms and someone else's company. The apartment was almost aggressively ordinary, but in that emptiness, I sensed something I had forgotten existed. A future not shaped by his betrayal. I signed the lease before I could talk myself out of it. The decision didn't make me feel triumphant. It made me feel shaky, almost feverish, as if I had done something irreversible with numb fingers. On the drive home, Seattle blurred past in wet gray streaks. The overpasses, the evergreens, the coffee stands with handwritten chalk menus. And I kept thinking, this is real now. This is real. Each repetition landed differently, less like fear, more like fact. That night, I waited until after dinner. Ryan had made salmon and rice, another careful performance of effort. We ate mostly in silence. He kept glancing at me as if trying to read the weather in my face. I let him. When he began clearing the plates, I said, "I signed a lease today." He froze with my glass in his hand. For a second, all sound seemed to leave the room. Even the refrigerator hum receded. "A lease?" he repeated. "I'm moving out." The glass touched the counter too hard. Not enough to shatter, enough to ring. "Emily, don't do this." I almost said, "You already did this." Instead, I folded my hands in my lap to stop them from trembling. "I already have." He turned toward me completely then, panic finally showing itself without the usual polish. "No, we are not making a permanent decision in the middle of a crisis." I looked at him. "This crisis lasted more than a year, Ryan. You just weren't the one bleeding from it." His face hardened briefly, more from helplessness than anger. "So you're leaving? That's your answer?" "My answer," I said, is that I cannot heal in the place where I was deceived every day. You think running away is healing? There it was, the shift, the tiny blade hidden inside the plea. I stood up slowly. This is exactly why I have to go. He frowned. What does that mean? It means every conversation with you becomes a distortion field. I tell you what you did to me, and somehow I end up defending the fact that I'm hurt. He opened his mouth, shut it, then walked to the sink and braced both hands against the counter. His shoulders rose and fell once. I said I would do anything. No, I said quietly. You said that after doing whatever you wanted. That silence struck deeper than shouting could have. For a long moment, he didn't turn around. When he finally did, his eyes looked tired in a way I might once have rushed to soothe. I love you, he said. The words passed through me without landing. Maybe because I had spent too many nights asking myself what love meant in the hands of someone who could divide himself so completely. Maybe because I no longer believed love, by itself, was proof of character. Or maybe because those 3 words had arrived too late, carrying too little truth to support their own weight. I think, I said carefully, you love the version of me that made your life feel stable. He stared at me. The woman who kept the house warm, I went on, who believed you, who absorbed your moods and made excuses for your absence and smiled in public so you could keep thinking of yourself as a decent man. Maybe you loved me, but you also used me. His expression broke then, not theatrically, not beautifully, just broke. A human face collapsing under an accusation too accurate to argue with. I cried later, after I locked myself in the bathroom and turned on the faucet to muffle the sound. Not because I had changed my mind, because final decisions carry grief even when they are right. I sat on the closed toilet lid with one hand over my mouth and let the tears come hard and hot, grieving not only Ryan, but the woman I had been before I understood how much betrayal can hollow out a person from the inside. 2 days later, I began packing. Not everything, only what was mine, or what I could touch without feeling sick. Clothes, books, my grandmother's lamp from the guest room, the blue ceramic bowl I bought at a street fair before Ryan and I were married. Bathroom things, winter coats, a box of letters. While I worked, I realized something unexpected. I was no longer packing from panic. I was packing from clarity. Each drawer I emptied felt less like surrender and more like translation. I was converting my life back into something I could carry, something that still belonged to me. Ryan hovered in doorways, offering to help, then retreating when I ignored him. Once he said, "You don't have to do this today." I taped shut another box and answered without looking up, "I know." That was the difference now. I knew. I knew staying would teach me to mistrust my own mind. I knew forgiveness without truth would become self-erasure. I knew a marriage could survive hardship, illness, debt, loss. But it could not survive one person making a home out of deception while the other called it love. On my last night there, I stood alone in the living room after the boxes were loaded in my car. Rain ticked softly at the windows. The house looked larger, half empty, stripped of the details that had made it ours. For one aching moment, I saw us as we had been, younger, hopeful, carrying in furniture, laughing over paint samples, believing permanence could be built by wanting it hard enough. Then the image passed. I picked up my keys, walked to the front door, and did not look back.